I'll tell you what I found. For 15 years, I was looking for the manifest for my grandfather's ship, and his name was Vuker. So it was indexed under Wijuker, and it wasn't Sam or Shlomo or anything. It was a different name, and I am so happy.
And in that epistle, he repeats the scripture in Malachi and tells us with great precision what that means. And what that means is tracing the lineage of mankind and to do the work that we are now engaged in. Still, we also believe that these technologies that you've spoken of, Julia, have been placed on the planet for a purpose at this time so that this work can actually be accomplished.
And so we thought maybe in order to fulfill the mission of the company, we need to raise a lot of venture capital, spend it on content and marketing, and really grow into the company that could afford to digitize the world's genealogy records. So that's where we started going. But I think within 2 or 3 years, we all realized that we didn't understand the venture capital industry. We didn't understand the small print. We were anxious to take the capital, but probably not as anxious as we should have been to understand all the terms and conditions that are associated with venture capital and who's now in charge of running the business. So we lost control very quickly of Ancestry.com.
And what were the ramifications of that?
How long do you have? The biggest one for me is kind of the lock-in for online family trees and all of the records that someone might discover. So for example, let's say that 10 years ago you became an Ancestry subscriber and you've spent now $3,000 or $4,000 over a 10-year period, and of course thousands of hours of your time to go in and find all the records pertaining to your family, to your maternal line, your paternal line, the different countries that your ancestors came from. And as a labor of love for your own, posterity or your own relatives, you want to create this family history. And so you're successfully finding all kinds of records and you link them to your tree. But there's a lock-in there where you really can't export your tree with all of the associated links and records. You can probably pay some money to get some of it printed or preserved in that form, and maybe buy copies for all of your relatives. But there's a real lock-in, and it obviously helps Ancestry retain users. If you want to keep seeing those records that you've identified, you need to keep subscribing to Ancestry.
One of the differences between Family Search and Ancestry is Ancestry is accountable quarter to quarter. We have a longer time frame. Our boss is different.
Some things I wasn't expecting It's like on my father's side, I wasn't expecting a European bloodline on my father's side. And some of the stories and some of the information that I had received on my father's side of the family and on my mother's side of the family, some of it hasn't been accurate. It hasn't been the same as far as what I had been being told over the years. Kind of disorientation. It's you know, all these years you're thinking Ethiopia, which, you know, whenever I meet someone from Ethiopia, I kind of like have a bond with them. I haven't really gotten anything clear on my father's side with the Native American side of my family, but it is here. We need to just get, you know, more information. It is kind of I feel a disconnect kind of from what I have known and what I have been kind of going with. I kind of feel a little disconnect, and it's kind of like I don't feel a reconnection with anything else at this point. You know what I mean?
I'm reassured by the DNA. I'm not reassured anymore based on paper, because all the stories that were told on paper or through word of mouth through the generations are obviously not true, because they're nowhere in the DNA. So I would have to say that I would much prefer at this point to go with the DNA information and build upon the DNA through other family members, through maybe our kids one day, through cousins, aunts, brothers, sisters, however we can do this, but to build it up from a DNA standpoint and compare the paper to the DNA.
I think the industry does sell it as an innate desire. In that respect, I would describe it as being part of the makeover industry, in the sense that people are now expected to make over their family history, which is not to say to write it in a particular way, but to at least have understanding of it in order to make sense of the present and to make sense of themselves, their behaviour, their characteristics, their attitudes in the present too. So in that sense, it's about making over the self using the resources of the past.